Hello, welcome back. I'm Savalian, a software dev slash creative, and this is the second video in a little series that I made because I was gonna make one video but it was way too long. So if you haven't seen the first video and you would like to, I'll leave a link somewhere for that one. But this is all about game UI, and it's about learning how to analyze game UI and how to, in the sense of constructive criticism, in the sense of figuring out what works and what doesn't. And in this video, I'm going to be doing that for 3 different games. Just a reminder, I mentioned this in the first video, I am not a professional UI designer. I'm a software engineer. I have implemented UIs before, but I have not designed them. They get designed by somebody else who knows what they're doing, and then I just implement them. So if you disagree with what I'm saying, you may objectively be right, and that's okay. But I want to make it clear that these are my opinions. These are how I feel and what I think when looking at these UIs. And I think that this is an important skill for indie game developers specifically to figure out what speaks to them and what they want to continue on in their own game. So the things that I'm saying might not exactly be for you, but I think this process is useful for everyone to learn how to do. So let's get into it. Okay, this next one's gonna be really quick. It's Elden Ring. I'm not gonna say much about Elden Ring because it is a totally different game from the one I'm making. I also don't really like Elden Ring. I don't like that whole genre. I don't like the UI, but I do think there are some things to learn from how they've done the UI. So I'm gonna talk about that just briefly. What Elden Ring has is a consistent sort of design language that they're using in their game. So for one thing, the fonts, these are the same fonts they use in all Souls games. It's very recognizable. It's for anyone who has seen other Souls games, you identify that style and it brings up those memories to sort of support the experience. Elden Ring has this very dark interface. It's brown, it's kind of grimy, like the color is kind of gross and dirty, but there's this hint of gold shining through. And I think this really represents the game, Elden Ring. While I personally think it looks unappealing, it's supposed to feel kind of bad and dirty. So in the game, you are tarnished. This world is bleak and monstrous and dangerous and uncaring. Everything is bad, except there are these little hints of shining gold light, like the grace points and the souls, or the runes, I've forgotten what they're called already, that you pick up that are shining with this beautiful gold light. And this is success and progress. They lead you, these little light paths lead you to the next big thing. And all of that is mirrored in the UI with this dark, dirty brown color with all these little hints of gold. So it's another situation where I've never really thought this deeply about UI before, but it works on a level that is more emotional than just aesthetic. Okay, For the King is a turn-based strategy game. It's very cute. I love the low poly style. It's one of my favorite styles. They use a lot of depth of field as well, which I also like. But this UI, I have really conflicted feelings about. It's kind of similar to Going Medieval, where I didn't play the game and think, oh, this UI sucks. But there is a lot going on that I think is not exactly good design and could be improved for clarity, for readability, and just for making it easier for the user to understand what they're seeing. The first thing I noticed when looking at this UI from like an analytics standpoint is that I don't think their main fonts go together that well. This is just a gut feeling. I don't really understand how you pick fonts, but this curvy, thick, stylized font looks really strange to me, used right next to this like thin, slanty modern fonts. Something about them just feels like they clash. So I don't know how I will learn a skill like this, maybe just trial and error, but I feel like the font, if the font was a little bit less narrow, I think it would have meshed better with the main curvy font. That's just a guess though. The real thing that I wanted to point out is these character information panels, which are so busy. They put everything you could possibly want on these character bars. They're where you do most of the things in the game, and it's hard to see at a glance what everything means. So you have a lot of numbers around the side of the character bar, like a lot of numbers. It creates the effect almost of a spreadsheet where you're just like bombarded by a big grid of numbers. And like some of them have these different shaped borders that are, I believe these are meant to be like shield shaped to show these are your like resistances, except one of them is evasion, which is not a resistance, it's slightly different. So all of these numbers have different borders with different colors, and they're in different positions that are not really tied to anything else. One thing I thought was weird was that the health and mana are on two bars that are the same, they're in the same spot, but the health text is up top, and it's like it's like 10 times bigger than the mana text. And I know from playing that that's the health number and it's red, so that kind of clues you in that it's the health number. But there's something really disjointed about having the bars equal in importance visually, but then the number attached to the bar is like up top. It's kind of in a separate panel, and then the mana number is actually on the bar where you would expect it to be. I'm not sure the inventory needs to be here. I think maybe it adds a little bit too much. There's just a lot being displayed, and I think as you're playing, you learn what everything is, you learn where to find it, but I'm just not sure it's really that important to have everything on screen at one time. And I think even if you wanted to keep it all on screen at one time, certain things could be smaller, they could be represented differently. I'm not an expert, like I said, but I think there's definitely improvements that could be made here. And they're coming out with a second one for the King 2. So we'll see how that one looks. Maybe they took another pass at this. Who knows? The next game is actually closer to the game I'm building. So it's diplomacy is not an option. This game is a strategy game. It has different types of units you can place, and it's important that the player understands how those units are different and what they do, just like my auto chess game. Overall, this UI is pretty simple, but it has all these little flourishes. So it's mostly made up of this dark brownish gray panel background with a little border or just a dark gradient. And they use this sort of grayish brown, red, and bronze as their main colors, but it's all very desaturated, so it's very muted. The only things that are not a muted color are very important, such as like the pause label, the incoming wave counter, the red indicator tells you where a wave is coming from. So they're using color very intentionally to, have everything that's sort of normal day-to-day fade into the background, and then the important stuff really stands out. They also had a lot of fun with the research screen, making it kind of look like a piece of parchment that someone has like drawn all these different things on. It's a little busy, but it's a lot more engaging than your typical just plain research tree. It's got fun icons, and the background imagery is really fun, and so I think they took a risk on this one. It could have been a big mess, but I think it actually looks really good. They also have some little visual things here that connect related information together. So when you select some research to do, it gets this little spiky animated border that is very similar to the animated border on the current research area. So we're kind of visually connecting, these two things are related. I also really like how they've formatted these pop-ups with information about the the research. So the flavor text is a little bit more toned down, and then you have very specific text about what it does. So like the one about making your people faster says like shoes really do matter or something, and then the actual text says like workers gain this amount of movement speed. I really like stuff like that where they've made it stand out, like this is the actual mechanic that's part of this, and then the flavor text is there for you to enjoy, but it doesn't overpower the useful text. A lot of the UI relies on iconography rather than text, which is great as long as the player isn't confused about what the icons mean. So in this case, if you hover on any icon, it tells you what it is and what it means. This is good because it teaches new players, it makes them familiar with the icons, but in the future, they aren't bogged down with just a bunch of text on screen, because now they have learned what all these icons mean. They use consistent icons across the game so that, this particular icon always means like this is people, or this is your workers, stuff like that. I think that visually this UI looks really nice. I don't always love like medieval themed games because I feel like they go a little bit too hard on making it look medieval, and it's just not appealing to me. This one, I think they found a really nice compromise, because everything does look a little bit like bronzed, a little bit plain, like you might see. They have these little patterns that are very like Renaissance to me. I'm not like an art history major or anything, so I could be wrong, but it has the style, but it's not overpowering. They didn't go like full, ink on parchment, which I know, like, wow. World of Warcraft UI is almost unbearable for me to look at. It's so ugly. I'm not going to talk about World of Warcraft in this video, but back to the point, which is that I think they've done a really nice job of putting a sort of modern shimmer on top of this medieval style, and I just think it looks really good. The buttons have this like gradient, so they look substantial. They're not just flat. The borders have a little bit of a shine, like they're bronzed. It doesn't feel so detailed that it's gaudy or overdone. Just a note about the fonts. They use an all caps serif font for the headers and a sans serif font for regular text. I've seen this recommended as like a thing to do with typography before. Using one and then the other is a nice way to like separate the two types of fonts. And then, like I mentioned earlier, I think 2 fonts is about that's the recommended amount of fonts to use in one piece of media, whether it's a marketing page or a game or a PowerPoint presentation. I'm sure there are exceptions to this, but I've seen a lot of games where they just they use a different font for everything, or like a website, and it's just painful to look at. So I would recommend toning it down. Try to use 1 or 2 instead of 5. I think you'll be better off. There's also this nice parallax effect, which is not really as much a UI thing as it is just a general game thing, but as you go into different menus and come back out of them, the scene shifts around as if you are looking in different places to look at these different menus. I believe Overwatch did a similar thing. I watched a video on someone who did this analysis with Overwatch's UI, and I believe they had a thing where they pan around to look at different menus, and it just feels very polished. So that's Diplomacy is not an option. I have actually done a review on this game, a little playthrough and a talk about how it works, and I love it. I actually, as I booted up the game to look at the UI, I did play it for several hours afterwards because it was just so fun. That's just how it goes sometimes. Okay, thank you for listening to me ramble about game UI design. I hope it was useful or entertaining, or hopefully both. Both would be good. If you would like to see more videos from me, don't forget to subscribe if you would like to do that. And I will be back soon with another video, and I hope to see you there. Bye bye bye.